Hello, everybody. Welcome to our InEight March 2026 webinar, Rebuilding the Culture, Women Leading Construction's Workforce Transformation. My name is Natalie Takis, and I am going to stop messing up my words here. I serve at InEight as a product director over our reporting products. I handle a lot of road mapping, research, technology investigation, and work very closely with our dev team. But today I'm stepping out of that box and I'm going to be moderating a very esteemed panel of leaders and change makers in the industry on our webinar today. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Don't forget to mute yourself. You should be muted on your way in. And let us know you're here by utilizing the chat feature. So there's a chat feature over on your right or left-hand side, and then there's also a Q&A feature. So this is separate than the chat feature. Make sure you use the Q&A feature to enter your questions so that we can get them sorted in and potentially be able to ask them live today. Lastly, we would love to see your reactions, so don't forget to utilize those live reactions and fill out our survey at the end. Like I mentioned, my name is Natalie Takis, and I am on the InEight side, but we have three phenomenal panelists with us today, and I'm going to send it over to each one of them to introduce themselves and to talk a little bit about what inspired them to join the construction industry. So Marco, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Natalie, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm flattered for all the nice words that had been shared in the last minute, and I'm very happy to represent Ghella and, of course, and giving my perspective on, this interesting topic. So a little bit about myself, trying to really keep it brief. My name is Marco Fontana. I'm the managing director of Ghella here in Australia, been so for the last 6 years and counting, been with the company a bit longer. Ghella is a global multinational infrastructure company, handling mainly our expertise lies in underground. And we've done a lot of large jobs here in Australia, and of which I'm very proud. In terms of my trajectory, I come from a very different background. I'm not an engineer, so sometimes I get the weird look when you say what you're doing in construction. It was actually probably the reason why I ended up in construction, I think, in hindsight, was probably because I should have done engineer as a start. My dad always told me that, and I went on economics, did a living out of it, but I effectively found that the finance side of things really didn't work out too well for me. I missed something a bit more practical, seeing the practical results of it, and hence circa 10, 11 years ago, my career started shifting from finance to construction. That's how I entered into the construction sector, more through, let's say, the finance funnel, but now I'm fully vested in the construction. Love the industry, love what you can do on a day-to-day life. Every day I take the Sydney Metro here to go to work. I feel so proud that we've been part of it and, changing the life of so many people on a daily basis. And that's what keeps me going. And I look forward to exchange, have a good exchange of ideas on how we can, increase women participation in this wonderful industry. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Marco. And Sonika, let's go to you next.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sonika Botha. I'm working at the Hastings District Council in New Zealand. I've been here for coming up 20 years. Started with my education in civil engineering in South Africa and moved to New Zealand 20 years ago. I've only worked at Hastings District Council in New Zealand. But across that time, I started as a project manager and had the opportunity to work across three waters: transportation, aquatic facilities, seismic strengthening of our opera house, a whole range of different things. At the moment, my role is still relatively new to me. I only started in September last year as the program controls manager for our recently set up program delivery office. What interested me in this industry is originally I was really interested in psychology, and I didn't think there was much of a career path there. So I thought, well, what else am I good at? And I was good at physics and mathematics, which led me to engineering. And I like the idea of building things. I love the sights, the smells, the big cranes and trucks and all those exciting things, but also the fact that we're building generational infrastructure for our communities. But what I found was being in engineering gives you the opportunity to build teams because a lot of the success of projects depends on how we relate to each other and the relationships we build across our teams. So that's where I get to live my passion for psychology, is in building teams that work well together.
That is a very unlikely connection that you made, but it makes a lot of sense. That's so interesting. I love to hear that. Thank you so much. And then finally, I'm a little biased, but I love your name. Natalie, let's go over to you.
Thank you. I'm Natalie Ambroso, and it's really great to join today from the land of the Turrbal and Yagara people, the traditional owners in sunny Brisbane. I'm the property and building market leader at GHD in South Queensland. So I have carriage of our business here, around 150 kind of architects, engineers, project managers and scientists, and we get to build and design cool things every day, such as defence facilities, transport facilities, work in the civic community, and justice sectors, health, education, and more. So it's really cool to be right from sketching something on a piece of paper to seeing it come out of the ground. I started my career as a structural engineer in 2008, so 18 years in the industry now, working from designing now through to leadership. And last year I was recognised as Consult Australia's Future Leader, which was a really exciting kind of career highlight for me. How I was attracted to join the industry is I actually grew up on a rural farm property. And as part of farming, there's a lot of problem solving, a lot of creativity, a lot of resourcefulness required. So, I mean, we've got sort of dams and windmills and machinery and just vegetable patches, farms. There's all sorts. There's all sorts of pieces that go into that, and I really loved working to find solutions when things went wrong. I also had an auntie that was a structural engineer, and I think we'll spend a bit of time today talking about the visibility of role models in the industry. So that helped for me. I was able to participate in some summer camps through school during high school, and that helped reinforce for me not only that I enjoyed the problem solving and the work, but I also came across a lot of like-minded people and knew that this would be a place where I would enjoy a really rewarding career.
That's really funny you mentioned a lot of what drew you to the industry was around problem solving. My husband is a mechanical engineer, and problem solving is one of his favorite things, and he talks about how he loves to solve problems in his job all day long. So I find that to be like a very common element when I talk to folks in the industry, that finding unique, challenging problems super enticing to just jump in and try to solve. So that's really, really, really cool. I wish I was as creative. However, I'm not. But I would like to jump into, so we talked a little bit about what brought you to the industry. I want you to now expand on what kept you in the industry. What was it that you loved about being in the industry? And then on the flip side of that, I also want to go into what was an identifying moment for you when you saw that change needed to come about. So I didn't know if anybody wanted to start. I'd be happy to randomly select one of you.
I'll start. So what kept me in the industry is that no 2 days are the same. There's so many different pathways you can explore, different things you can learn about, different roles you can explore in terms of the teams that make up these projects, different areas, whether it's vertical build, underground, so many different things. When I did my studies, we had 140-ish people starting, and there was only 4 women in that group, and only 2 finished. So that's a significant shift from the type of numbers we see today, especially in New Zealand. I don't know what the numbers look like in South Africa at the moment. But I've learned a lot about how having diverse people from different cultures, different backgrounds in a team really gets you to a better solution. And like was mentioned about problem solving, a lot of engineering is problem solving. And the wider the base of input, the better solution we can come up with.
I think that's great. I very much agree. Marco, any comment from you on why you're still in the industry and what has made you believe that change is needed in the industry with regards to support and participation for women?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned a little bit in my intro. I mean, of course, the fact that I'm not an engineer, for me, it's basically a never-ending process of learning, you know, in terms of all the technical solutions and things. And I'm amazed, you know, of the things that we design and build, you know, and, you know, effectively also then seeing it effectively being pushed forward when they're actually built at the end. So that's definitely something I like. The other thing, which I think is very peculiar of the construction industry, particularly on the space where I work, which is infrastructure, is the concept of, you know, the tender and, you know, the award of the job. You know, we spend so much time, effort, money, resources on, you know, on putting forward the best options and tenders to the client. And that element of euphoria that you have when, you know, when you effectively are awarded a tender after sometimes, honestly, it's 2 or 3 years of work, if you add the EOIs and everything, is so inebriating, is so fulfilling that, you know, I think it keeps me going every time, and it makes up for the time that you don't win, unfortunately, which are equally, you know, on the flip side, difficult. But, you know, that's something really nice about this industry that I love. And in terms of change, I think that, you know, the moment in which, you know, it was pretty apparent to the industry that, you know, there was the need for change. I know it's not a nice moment to remember, but COVID, in terms of the construction industry, was a big, you know, a big catalyst for change. You know, if you remember back then, you know, the construction industry kept on going and going and going, you know, even when, you know, there was lockdown as, you know, as a specific industry that had to go ahead, and then all of a sudden we had to stop. And I think in that moment, you know, a lot of people start thinking, you know, how potentially, you know, something that was, of course, externally driven could improve productivity. And, you know, a lot of the discussion, they are still part of the agenda. Like, for example, how, you know, we increase flexibility, how we increase productivity in the job site, how we increase women participation in an ever-expanding pipeline. So I think that was the moment in which I really thought that, you know, the industry was ripe for change and that we had to do something to fix it.
Definitely. Yeah. 2020 was not a great time, but definitely a big learning curve and a significant experience. Nothing else. Natalie, any comments from you?
Yeah, I think what keeps me in the industry is just doing good work with good people. We are, you know, in construction industry and engineering, we're genuinely making a difference in the community every day. And when you can really connect to your input into that, it's really rewarding. At the same time, I think we all love what we do, the creative process, the problem solving, the learning, and the really diverse career paths that we can take. So you never get bored in the construction industry. So that's what keeps me here. In terms of the need to change, like if I even just rewind back to my first year out of uni, which is 2008, we had a construction industry that really wasn't made for women. Hopefully we've got time for a few little stories. I'll try and keep them brief. But my experience going out to site, which was pretty regular, like every week I'd be out once or twice looking at something being constructed. And there was basic considerations like planning bathroom breaks. Okay, it's a 45-minute drive, whereas the nearest service station to this site, because quite frankly, trying to find a bathroom on site was either not possible or pretty terrifying. So you just couldn't assume that that's a facility you would have access to in a way that you'd feel safe to use it. And then there was a choice of interior decorating inside the site sheds. I'm not sure if it was budget constraints or something, but there was a lot of pin-ups out of the magazines all over the sheds that I kept coming across. And there was this one core memory that I have where I was left alone inside this site shed writing my inspection report. So I kind of ripped down Miss January through to Miss December and put them in the bottom of the bin without saying a word. So that's the site experience. I think inclusion in my office in engineering looks like me pretending to like football so that the boys included me in their highly inappropriate email threads. And look, it was all in good laugh at the time. But it did reinforce to me that change was needed, but I think also possible. And while now I can say them with a little bit of jest and they might sound like kind of shocking experiences for someone to go through in their early 20s in a workplace, I really applaud the bravery of the directors of my company not to hold me back, because you can see how it would have been a really easy decision to think, well, we won't send her to site because we want to protect her from these experiences. But then how can we create and perpetuate change if we aren't brave enough to start to challenge the system?
Love that. Thank you for sharing. Keep the stories coming. They're so wonderful and I'm sure very relatable. Thank you for sharing that. That was, I'm trying to imagine what I would have done in that situation. And that's shocking. That's a really nice pivot, and maybe we'll start with you, Natalie, on this next question. So culture at an organization is incredibly hard to change. It's more of a fixture of a company. It takes a long time to curate and an even longer time to change. So what, in your experience, have you seen over time shift in these situations? So you mentioned the decor in the trailer. Have you seen changes? I mean, I understand your role has changed over time, but have you seen change made there?
Oh, look, I'd like to think we don't come across it today. And I, even reflecting for this panel, Natalie, wondered, like, did those posters ever go back up in that shed? You know, did they go back up, or was that kind of silent protest enough to cause reflection that, hey, maybe this isn't appropriate anymore? I think we'll get it wrong. We always get it wrong before we get it right. And acknowledging that, I think, if, you know, we might get it wrong, we reflect that we've got it wrong, we do it differently next time, that shift in behavior ultimately causes shift in culture. So it's going to be small things, but it's the small things that will shift the culture in the long term.
I love that. Small, manageable pieces. I do want to actually shift over to Marco now. So Marco's organization, Ghella, they have a 30% participation rate of women in their workforce. Now, the national participation rate of women in the construction workforce in Australia is 14%. So obviously at Ghella, they're doing something right. And Marco, I want to talk a little bit more about some cultural change you've seen at your organization, or what are some things, maybe small steps, as Natalie alluded to, that have driven change at your company?
Thanks, Natalie. Look, first of all, I guess, I take the accolade, but, I think it's also fair, to our fellows, construction companies and partners in many of the jobs, is that, of course, there is an element of how Ghella operates. Of course, we're a very specialized contractor. So, we do have a slightly lower percentage of blue collars in our workforce, which, explains in a way a little bit, these good numbers. And that's not to take away anything that, we do very well here, in which I'm going to touch upon now. But I think only to set a little bit the scene. In terms of, I think, I agree with Natalie. The first, the first concept is the small steps. And it's also about, the good example that you give, right, when you do these things. So in order for us to be able to, beat the the average, the national average. I think our recipe was fairly simple. I mean, the first thing that you need to do is create an environment, a lawful environment in where, women have the exact same rights to operate and to participate than men. And of course, it's easy to say it, but, we all know the construction industry, but by many means has this reputation of being a little bit more of a machist industry, right? And it comes from a long time back. And in certain cases, it's also not justified, but explained because, some of the works that have to be carried over, of course, has a lot of physical element behind it. But, I think the industry has moved a lot from that, and there's a lot of, machineries and other things that allow, most of the work and services that are provided, to be gender equal, if you want. So the first element is, of course, creating a lawful environment to protect women. And, what do I refer to that? I refer, for example, to policies, right? It could be easy to think, but, the fact of, reviewing the policies, ensuring that those are shared in the organization by the leadership so that, all the organization can see how important are those leadership, being, of course, very, very decisive in managing all the issues related to, and I've been speaking aloud, sexual harassment, sexual, related matters that, are very important in this industry and that, have been are very top of the pops now with everything that happens with, the building bed inquiry that is going on in the last couple of years. So that's, point number one is ensuring that, there is the basic environment for, women to have a successful career. Then, of course, there is, the small things that Natalie was referring to, which is, trying to do the right thing in the things that are more critical for women. I mean, we all know, for example, that throughout the life of the women, mothership is one of the most critical parts because, of course, the personal element comes within, the professional side a lot because, it's something that, it's a big undertaking and, a lot of it falls under, the women in these cases. So we've been taking, a very pragmatic and proactive approach, listening to, the people that were working with us, or what are the steps that we could do, in order to improve that, that specific part. And things could be extremely simple in terms of course, where possible, ensuring that element of flexibility for all types of matters, in that period of life in which, the women has also other priorities to look after, which is not the professional part, right? And then I guess, the third thing is, the most important part is the culture of the company. And hence, I was very skeptical on, marketing this part of what we're doing, simply because I believe that word of mouth, it's how, particularly in the works that we do, we generally arrange works in big joint ventures in which we are with other companies. So our employees, share the workflows or the project side with other companies, and they talk about, how this company is handling this, what type of flexibility you've got. And I think that's the best type of advertising you can get when it's people within the company that goes out and say, look, I like Ghella because they do this and that, and rather than, being very vocal. But there is also, the last bit, which is, of course, we like to let the market know what we're doing. There is a more larger things that we're doing, like in our jobs. For example, Suburban Rail Loop in Melbourne will be the first tunneling job. We'll have a all-women TBM crew. So there's going to be more than 16 women. We already done 800 interviews, 16 women that will manage for the first time, a TBM, one of the shifts of the TBM. And then there's a lot of other things that we do as Ghella or as an industry through Australian Construction Association with NAWIC, trying, of course, to promote as much as possible the ability to women to join this industry. Because as I mentioned when I was invited to do this webinar, I think this is not because we like to do it. It's simply because it's a business necessity with such a big pipeline now. We cannot do without a decent participation of women in this industry.
That's awesome. I mean, when you're talking about half the population, it's a lot of ideas and a lot of creativity that could serve as, I don't know, just diversity to help move you forward. And Sonika, do you have any cultural shifts or agree with the small moves make a big change?
I'll just jump onto what Natalie said about the toilets. I don't get the opportunity to go out to site that often anymore, but just before Christmas, I did go out to site, and they actually had a girls only portaloo with the sign up, and they said they had the male one, and they had like a joke, I can't remember, but I actually took a picture and sent it to my family and said, look, they've got a girl portaloo on site. But it's the little things. It's about, and I don't think we can underestimate the value and the example of what leadership sets in terms of policies, but also in terms of their day-to-day interaction, the conscious or unconscious messaging they're sending out in the way they talk about initiatives or ideas or people, giving women space in meetings to talk, because sometimes, I mean, and I'm an introvert as well, so it's really hard to jump in there if there's not space for me to talk. So it's so important that the example that is set. What I've actually found in my career is it was kind of easier to get acceptance when I was more on site and with the site people. I'm actually finding it in a way harder to have a voice as I move up in the council. So it's different and it's interesting.
That is an interesting point. Do you have any thoughts as to maybe why that is? It's okay to say if you don't. I know I dropped that question on you.
I think it's something that I've noticed more recently, that I'm like, oh, something's feeling different. Why is it feeling different? And I'm still trying to figure it out myself. But it's something that I didn't experience as much in some of my other roles.
That's really interesting. Well, I mean, so in the United States, we use the phrase "nothing good ever comes easy." So it's really encouraging to hear that you all and your organizations are fighting the good fight to bring support and representation for females in your workforce. So I want to take that opportunity to pivot to. We do talk a lot about representation. What exactly does representation mean to you? What does that look like? Is it females in leadership roles? Is it in purely just increasing the number of females you have in your organization? Let's talk about what that looks like to you personally. And Sonika, if you want to start.
My own personal way of looking at things is people are people, and I don't see. I don't believe it's unbiased, but I don't see. I look at who's the best candidate for the job, and as a woman working in the industry, I don't want to be picked for something just because I'm a woman and to bring up the women's numbers. I want to be picked or included in the team because I'm genuinely the best candidate for the job. So that's sort of the way I approach how I make up my teams, but it is also about making it a welcoming space for everyone.
So from your perspective, it's more about creating the space for people to feel comfortable in.
Yes.
I think that's great. Natalie, any comment from you?
Yeah, sure. Representation, like to me, if I think about why it's important, we're all trying to navigate the decisions we make to live our best lives. So as we're doing that, we're looking forward, we're looking for examples of, if I stay on this trajectory in 10 or 20 years, am I going to live the life that I'm wanting to live? Can I achieve what I'm wanting to achieve? And role models and representation is a good way for us to test and gauge that. So we're thinking, okay, if I want access to the great technical leadership roles, to the organizational leadership roles, am I seeing people like me who've done a career like this, who's achieved that suggests that I will also be able to achieve that? If I want to be able to manage my caring responsibilities, whether I'm a man or a woman in this industry, am I looking forward and seeing role models who are able to both have a really good career and also have flexibility to manage those responsibilities? How are the people who look like me enjoying it? Are they actually having a good experience in this industry and in this career? And like, these are all systemic and kind of cultural, organizational issues. These are not kind of women issues. And so I think that the real influence in this is at organizational level, and representation does matter. It's not about whether you're that person that is representing it. It's that you can see that you can live a good life like that. I think the great news for this industry as well, with social media and the evolution of LinkedIn, is a few role models can go a lot further than they used to. There's so much broader visibility of representation, of role models, of examples that we can draw on and follow and be kind of inspired by to build our careers. And I think that'll be extremely helpful for the construction industry. But yeah, I think just don't underestimate, like, this is not a women's problem. Like, 40% of working people are parents. That's not the 40% women. That's, say, 20% who are men, 20% who are women. There's a lot of parents are both male and female, funnily enough. So men and women need to be able to see role models that can balance those caring responsibilities.
I think that, and Marco also talked a little bit about becoming a parent. It definitely affects both men and women. And I think I know sometimes my kids end up getting sick and I have to, in the middle of the day, take them to the doctor or whatever comes up. Knowing that my male colleagues feel that they can share those kinds of experiences as well, that makes me feel so much more comfortable. So like, that is a different kind of representation than I really have thought about before. So it's not just, oh, I'm young, I see more tenured female in the industry. Like, that could be me being able to see myself, but it's also seeing yourself in your peers and feeling, again, kind of going back to Ansonica's point, is it feeling welcome? So being able to have representation of just different facets of your life to bring you into the team, and obviously a tight-knit team works better. That's a really great perspective. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Natalie. Marco, any comment from you on representation?
I guess there's two factors, of course, in terms of representation. The first one is, how many industry do enter, how many women enter the industry, right? And, as I said, I think that there is certain areas that now are more easy in order for women to do so. But, thinking that, an industry such as construction will eventually be a 50% representation is probably, pushing the objective a little bit too high, because there are certain parts which will, probably always slightly best suited for men rather than women. And that's not the point. The point is not about it. Of course, there's been a lot of work done, but that's where, I think all the issues start. I mean, if you're effectively, when you're doing a graduate program, the representation of women in a graduate program is 30%, you're already starting with a handicap, because that's where, your original funnel is. And, at best, you should have a 50%. If not, of course, trying to reduce that gap, having 70% women and 30% men. And this is exactly what we're trying to do. Because what I don't like, in general terms, is considering supporting representation in senior role based on quotas. And the reason why I don't like it is because I think quotas, eventually don't award merit. You ended up being stuck on quotas if effectively you don't have the number and the representation of women within the organization. You ended up having to, select on a small pool, and eventually that might not give the best outcome for the company. So for me, it's critical that the initial recruitment push really skewed towards women, in order to ensure that when these women and men, throughout the career in Ghella or in any construction company, by natural attrition, they choose another company, they choose another career, you ended up at a senior point, you have the right representation to do the right decision. So that's where, at the moment, we at least are focusing a lot of our effort. And I think also, external entities are doing the same. If I look at, the work we're doing at the Australian Construction Association with regards to all the programs that have put in place to attract more women talent, the same that Infrastructure New South Wales is doing at the moment with some programs on the ground to ensure that, there's more women participation on the onset of the organization. And the same can be done by clients. Literally, a lot of contracts and projects can be signed upon, certain threshold of women participation or labor hours, done by women. So even the client can set up conditions for which that element of representation becomes part of the agenda of all the contractors, of all the companies.
I think that's an interesting point you made. And I definitely don't want to gloss that over, where just hiring someone because they're a female is not the right approach, right? Because if that reputation gets out there, then that could potentially have a negative impact on the person that you hired too, right? Like that could potentially work against them in their career. And that's not helping or supporting women. Hiring the best person is what's going to help and support and amplify female voices in the workforce. I love the distinction you made about your recruiting efforts, increasing the pool of females that you are targeting with your recruiting efforts. I think that's a really, really good point to make, because that's a meaningful change you can make to increase the likelihood that you're going to hire a female who is the best candidate for the role. I think that's a really important.
Natalie, sorry if I jump in. Just to complete the point, I think because you're right. It's always trying to hire the most brightest, and of course the best way of, if you put scholarships, which is something that we've done both in New Zealand and here in Australia, and those scholarships of course are targeted to bright women. That's the win-win situation. You are able to target the best talent, but of course because of the importance of the gender gap in the moment in the construction, we're a bit more, we're targeting more, women talent, and we're not afraid to say it. It's part of our strategy, and that's what we're trying to do at the moment.
I think that's great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Marco. That's really good perspective. I want to ask another question about kind of related to representation, but more along the lines of sponsorship versus mentorship. I know I personally see sponsorship and mentorship as two different things. I mean, in my mind, mentorship is something more intangible, I want to say, something you can seek out on your own, more around building relationships, where sponsorship, in my mind, is more organizational support. I guess I'm curious your guys' thoughts on that, and if you think in your organization you see a lot of females mentoring each other, or female sponsorship, or do you see a lot of males mentoring females, or males being organizational sponsors for other females? Any specific instances or any mentors or sponsors you've had in your career?
Yeah, I'd love to weigh in on it, Natalie, actually. I think what's important is that we have senior level decision makers sponsoring both men and women. And that's the key. It's not about women sponsoring women or men sponsoring women. It's decision makers sponsoring people in the business that has a bit of a diverse feel to who's benefiting from that. So sponsorship is often informal. That's the danger of it, is that we don't even realize we're doing it. And what it is, it's the people that we are putting forward as a candidate for a promotion. It's the people we're introducing to others that gets them a leg up for their next career opportunity. And it's those we're recommending for stretch assignments when we're in rooms that those people aren't even in. And we might not even realize we're doing it, or might not be intentional about the people that are benefiting from that. And those that are twice as likely to get promoted. So I've definitely benefited from sponsorship, both informal, where I've had relationships with people that have spoken for me where I've not been in the room, and that's been hugely beneficial to me in my career, and others that I've seen that happen for. There are also formal programs I've participated in through GHD. So we have a partner, Cultivate Sponsorships is the name of this external facilitator. They work with a lot of businesses in the construction industry, and that's a more formal program that just helps bring intentionality to how we are sponsoring and who we're sponsoring, to make it more of a habit, I suppose, who we're selecting to sponsor, and making sure that we can diversify that.
So would you say that sponsorship, it sounds like, maybe has made a larger impact in your career than mentorship?
Absolutely. Mentorship is good. It helps you develop skills, but it won't get you a promotion.
I think that's a fair assessment. And Sonika, any thoughts on that, on sponsorship versus mentorship, how that's impacted you throughout your career?
I think maybe within council, because it's not as big and varied as like GHD or like Ghella might be, with multiple offices and those sorts of things. It's much smaller. So I haven't had too much experience with sponsorship. But when I'm thinking about mentorship, of course, I had earlier in my career, had some senior line management people who did a great job with my mentorship. But I have built up quite a support network of really brilliant women across different consultancies or different people that I work with, that have been invaluable, and we catch up every month or two and just share frustrations and ideas and those sorts of things. So that's been so impactful, but also an enjoyable part of my career has been these relationships with some amazing women we've got in our industry.
Would you say that that has been a big part in the decisions that you've made throughout your career?
Well, in terms of brainstorming strategies, like I'm getting stuck at this point. What have you done that's worked for you, and how did people react to that? Because if you're stuck, it really helps to get a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. I think there are a lot of female mentors and male mentors that I owe a lot of my great ideas and my big decisions to. So it's really formative to have those kinds of people throughout your career. Marco, does Ghella do anything formal around mentorship or sponsorship, or have you seen changes around that in your organization?
Yeah, we have a formal mentorship process in which, we pair young graduates or even young engineers with more senior members of the team. And on this, I totally agree with Natalie. Actually, we try as much as possible to mix genders and to mix, expertise, simply because, I think in mentorship, like many other things in life, the good thing is about, having someone that challenges your view and looks at things differently. So we try to, match up in a very diverse way as, the mentors and mentees when we do these mentorship programs. And every year we refresh it. So we have a formal mentorship kickoff, in which, the people meet each other, they spend time. And then, of course, there is, a process of mentorship. And every year we revisit this mentorship plan. So that's something that we put in place, I think 4 or 5 years ago, and has been giving us very good results, not only in terms of, career enrichment, but also in terms of retention, because, effectively, you get early detections of, when there's something not working with a mentee, you get early detections of that. You can try to help out, steer, some of the decision or change their environment around that person. So that's something that we've done. On one side, just allow me just a general consideration between mentorship and sponsorship. Of course, they're different one to the other. I think, of course, having a big sponsor in an organization is great. It helps you, push your case for promotions or, for bonuses or whatever is the case. So, but I think we don't have to undervalue, importance of mentors. First of all, mentors can be outside of your own organization. In many cases, actually, it's probably better to have a mentor which is outside of your own organization that, doesn't know the politics and, can give you, an eagle-eye view of what's happening in your professional life. So in one side, I do think that mentorship maybe can be more 360 degrees because it's not only linked to your trajectory in that company, while a sponsor, will push you forward within that same company. A mentor could also tell you, have you thought about, doing something different? Have you thought about this company? I always say that each one of us is the CEO of our own company. That's what we sell. We sell our time. And then finding someone that gives you an advice that it's not linked to that company only is invaluable. Someone that, takes out the context of the company that you're living in and you're working and say, look, why have you thought about, this career? Have you thought about, joining this firm? Have you thought about speaking with this person outside of the company? I think it's great.
Totally unbiased opinion. I think we all need some more of that in our lives. I know I've got some really phenomenal mentors that I go to inside and outside of my organization that I feel like I can tell anything to, or I know that I can trust the advice that they're giving me, but that outsider perspective that is not intertwined and definitely unaffected by whatever choices you're making in your professional space, I think is a really important asset to have. And one other thing, I didn't know if any of you had any comments on reverse mentorship. So something one of my mentors has talked about a lot is reverse mentorship. And it's incredibly flattering for her to think that she learned something from mentoring me. Any comments on that from any of you? Have any of you had any of those experiences where you're mentoring someone or someone has said something to you about your impact as a mentee?
Always. It's impossible not to learn something when you build a relationship like that with another person, or it would almost be arrogant to think you wouldn't learn something. I've benefited so much. I think, especially as my career progresses, the mentor-mentee, reverse mentoring relationships that I've had with people earlier in their careers has helped me understand how culture and expectations are shifting across the generations. As much as I don't wish to think that I'm sort of one generation or so in now, the truth is that expectations are shifting all the time, and that's been a particularly great thing to learn. I'd like to say technology as well, that it's always good to see how each new cohort is and has been exposed to and used technology through their lives.
Oh yes, it's incredible. Even I haven't been in the workforce all that long, but I've been in the workforce long enough to see even differences for folks that are newer coming into the industry, how technology has shaped their education, has shaped their lives. That's actually a really good point. I do want to pivot to a technology question next. However, I would love to hear any additional thoughts on reverse mentorship from Marco or Ansonica, if you have any.
Well, all I can add is that I have learned a lot as well when I'm mentoring someone else. good way to see different ways I'm trying to communicate or share ideas, how the person reacts to it. Did they hear what I'm saying? Did they not hear what I'm saying? And that teaches me a lot about how I communicate and strategies I use.
I think it's a really good reflection of yourself. One of the other things that Natalie, you said that my mentor also says is I approach every relationship like I can learn something from the other person. And I think Marco, you kind of alluded to that too at the beginning. Always learning, always becoming more educated. And I do think that also goes a long way for soft skills too. If you have an approach of I can learn something from you versus I'm here to just impart my wisdom upon you. Like I mentioned, I do want to shift to a more technology centric question. So, how can organizations ensure that women are sponsored into high impact or digital / innovation style roles as opposed to maybe more operational or administrative roles?
Look, I'm happy to take that in terms of, saying the man who has his 10-year-old daughter teaching how to use ChatGPT. So I would refer myself as, as a dinosaur in terms of, and no, but apart from jokes, I mean, I think actually this is probably where, in terms of the construction industry alone, I mean, there is a slight advantage compared to other industries. Because where I do see, of course, challenges in, introducing a higher number and participation and representation of women, it's more on job, on job site, on job-related works and, things that are more physical. I'm seeing this in my organization. And of course, as we slowly transition to, the area of the artificial intelligence and, all everything that, means for us in terms of productivity, we are actually finding easier, deploying or using women that have, a lot of experience, much more than myself, of course, on this part, and that don't have not even, call it the physical gap that happens sometimes on the construction work. So this is what, we haven't touched upon, and I don't know if we're going to have time, in terms of what are the opportunities going forward in order to increase representation. I'd actually noted down, the digital sphere is one part in which there's no reason why, there shouldn't be an area in which, women representation should be minimum 50% or not above, because there's not an history, there's not something, a cultural baggage or an history baggage that, brings that type of work. And there's not even a physical, restraints on why that shouldn't be the case. So for me, that's one of the biggest opportunities that organizations have nowadays to ensure that, we break that, that barrier.
I agree. I think it lends itself really well to bringing in females, the digital sector. Natalie or Ansonica, do you have any thoughts on bringing females in the capacity of digital tools, or just making that a gateway into the organization to then become a leader or a decision maker?
I think it makes sense. There's probably two different angles to it I'll touch on. One is that historically, research indicates that one thing that can hold women back from leadership roles is they're not appropriately kind of mentored and coached into the strategic and business decision side of things, which we do draw on a lot of data and analyze a lot of data to make solid business decisions. So there's a piece there where we can really use these tools to up our leadership credibility and decision making through using, data-driven insights, I suppose. On the other side, I think we're seeing a real rapid increase and move towards data as an asset in itself. It's not just data about a certain asset, but data itself is an asset more and more in the construction industry, and there's an increase in clients wanting to have that data passed on to them to help them operate the facilities that they inherit at the end of the construction process. Marco made some great points. There's no physical disparities there to this line of work. And as this increases, I think that's a really great opportunity for us moving forward, where we're going to be able, there's no reason why we couldn't achieve a 50-50 gender representation in that sort of space. So it's exciting.
Definitely. And Sonika, any comments?
Yeah, from a more traditional client perspective, I can definitely say, especially over the last 5-ish years, the value of data and the importance of seeing data as an asset has just grown so much, and is still growing, and even like investing in data is growing within our council and across the industry. So that's a huge potential growth area to encourage women into the industry, and it takes away some of those potentially perceived barriers of being out on site, which I personally find exciting. But I know from talking to some other women, that's not a part of the construction that really appeal to them, but the data and digital side might. I think just about encouraging women into the industry, and sorry, Natalie, stepping aside from the digital side you were sort of heading, is about connecting with girls at school, from primary school through to high school, and opening their eyes about the possibilities that engineering is an option for them. I know our contractors do a lot of work with that. They've got like open days, and they specifically encourage girls to go as well, and let them play with some of the things. And council goes to the schools and talks to the students as well, and that's where you plant the seed, not when they're 20. We need to start planting the seeds earlier, that women can do technical work.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know what an engineer was when I was in primary school, so
exactly. I was looking at engineering options, and I didn't even know what a civil engineer did, and I was reading through a pamphlet. Oh, is that what they do? So right. A lot of it is about sharing what the opportunities are. It's not just lawyer, doctor,
right, teacher.
There's a whole other world out there. Yeah.
Understood. That's great perspective. I'm going to hand it over to Marco here soon. But I just want to remind everybody that we did not get to all the Q&A questions from the Q&A box. We will take those offline. And thank you so much for joining. In case I don't get to say that later on, Marco, let's wrap with your thoughts.
On what specifically in this case, Natalie?
Just how females in digitalization, how that marries in the industry, what opportunities that creates.
Yeah, look, I think, I thought I already replied to this one, but I'm happy to give it another go. I think that, of course, there is that, it brings new skill sets that are required in the industry that at the moment are not present in our industry. That's the reality. They're not present in any industry. And the good thing is that when there is a disruption, in any industry, there is the opportunity to cross-fertilize from different industries. So what I'm expecting, hopefully, is that because the industry is such in a dire situation when it comes down to productivity and to change its own skin, we'll take the opportunity to bring things that have been put in place in other industries. And that means bring talent, bring, resources to deliver the change also on the construction. And that's something that, will have opportunities for women. And that, we need just to be ready to have a fertile ground in our organization to make it happen. So Yeah.
No, that's perfect. Thank you, Marco. I think that perspective is really, really good. And I appreciate all three of you for joining us today and for being willing to share and have a really authentic conversation about your organizations and your journeys. Thanks to everybody for joining us as well out in the audience. I do want to encourage you to check out InEight.com for any future webinars and other cool things that we're doing here at InEight. And make sure you leave your feedback with the pop-up that you will receive. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. And again, thank you to our esteemed panelists. Appreciate your time so much.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you.